So we'll move on to our next speakers, which are Karen Coney and Jack Fitzpatrick, and their presentation is entitled "Collaboration and Transformation: A Story of Working Together to Support Autistic Students to Progress to Employment and the Positive Impact This Has Had on Us, our institution, and beyond." So I shall pass over to you, Karen and Jack. Just make sure.
Thank you. Hopefully you can see my slides now. I apologize for the very long-winded title that was that you just had to read out. So I'm not going to read it again. You can see what it is there. Um, Jack, shall I pass over to you to introduce yourself?
My name is Jack Fitzpatrick. I'm 23 years old with the diagnosis of autism and dyspraxia since the age of 4 years old. Karen, if you could go to the next slide, actually, I think
Yeah.
it is.
Yes,
I think
and
it's, I think
yeah,
it's
and then
three.
I'll
Yeah,
brilliant.
slide three where we'll introduce more.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks. And I'm Karen Coney, as mentioned, and I am a careers and employability consultant at Liverpool John Moores University. I'm also a student studying for a PhD at the Autism Centre for Education and Research at the University of Birmingham. And this is what we're planning to cover just now. First of all, brief introductions, and then so I'll be passing back to Jack in just a second for that. And then just a little bit about how we started working together. Yeah, then we'll go on to our stories, what's happened since. And then just a focus on what we've learned from working together before summarizing and talking about what we'll be doing next. So I'm going to pass back to Jack.
Yes, as the title of that said, I'm currently a PhD student at Liverpool John Moores University. My thesis is titled "Modern Policing in the 21st Century: Time for Inclusive Cultural Shift." I've next bit, Karen, please, thank you, and the last bullet point as well. I've been incredibly lucky to give presentations, including presenting to yourself this evening, to different organisations throughout my PhD. And my proudest moments have included presenting to Downing Street and the top team there, the FBI in Washington, D.C., and the Calgary Police Service in Alberta that I just came back from 2 weeks ago. I'll pass back to you, Karen.
Thanks. Now, yes, I'm not sure I can follow that with quite so many impressive organizations, but just to introduce myself, as mentioned, I'm a careers and employability consultant at John Moores. I've actually been a professional sort of in terms of careers consultancy for about over 20 years. But just in addition, as mentioned, I'm a student, have been a student for a long time, and just have found that studying, it really excites me when I think about studying as a way to improve my practice in order to make a difference. I guess that's something that increasingly is important to me and why I do it. My studies, and I guess they're becoming a sort of a sort of autism and disability specialist in terms of careers and employment has led to me sort of being invited to train organizations, train people within universities, and to speak at different events, which has been exciting. And I guess over time, what I would describe myself now is a disability activist. I have been invited to the House of Lords. That's the one exciting place I can mention. But I have a disability myself, but I think more importantly is I see some of the disadvantage experienced by disabled and neurodivergent people, and particularly autistic people in the workplace. This is something that I really want to do as much as I can about. So how did we start working together? Where did our partnership begin? Well, actually, it was as you could probably guess, it was at Liverpool John Moores, and it was a number of years ago now when Jack had just started his first year of his undergraduate degree, and I was working as I still am as a careers guidance professional, and he came for a one-to-one meeting. And during this time, we started talking about, as well as about Jack's plans for that year. At the end, I just, Jack had been talking about some of the things he was doing about trying to raise awareness of, I think, his people who were autistic and sort of thinking about the support that was needed. And that just happened to coincide with me. I was starting on my PhD, and I just was like, would you like to get involved? Was that, was my, I think my question. And Jack was like, yes. And in fact, it took a little while because I had to get ethics approved and all of this. I remember Jack being so eager. He was chasing me up, which was amazing because it was so exciting to think here's someone that I could work with who has a lot of energy and is also interested in exploring sort of similar things. So just to give a little bit about what had led me to choose the PhD. One of the things that I was doing some national research looking at what are the outcomes of disabled graduates. And I was finding two things. First of all, that yeah, we know that the number of autistic people is increasing year on year. People who are telling their institutions and university that they have that they are autistic, they have a diagnosis or identify as autistic. But what I was finding from my research was that year on year when I was doing this, that autistic graduates were having the lowest outcomes in terms of employment of any group of disabled graduates. And I just thought, well, I'd come to know I was working with autistic students, and I decided, what is going on here? There's something we need to find out what's happening. What are the challenges here? So that was what led me to choose to do a PhD on this area, looking particularly at what can be done by someone like me, a careers practitioner in an institution, to make a difference to that, to make those outcomes different. Now, I don't have a diagnosis of autism, so it was really important to me to actually work alongside people who do identify as autistic. And so I chose to use a participatory approach. I also chose action research because that is where the researcher is in the center of the process of what's being examined and explored, and this idea that you try something out, and a very cyclical approach. You reflect on how that went, and then you change things and try to improve it the following cycle. And what was particularly exciting for me about all of this was that the emancipatory paradigm. So thinking about how to not just, I guess I'm not neutral in this. I don't think that the current state of things is right, and I want to change that. So I guess I'm political in that sense, in what I'm hoping my research will do. And this emancipatory, this idea of trying to free people from sort of the challenges and those barriers that exist at the moment, and to do that using careers guidance. Does resonate with this social justice for approach to careers guidance, which is sort of an emerging theory that is coming out from my sector, which was exciting to hear that existed, and it's the framework I'm using for my PhD. So just very briefly to talk about what this has looked like. First of all, there's a sort of reconnaissance round where you kind of explore what is the current situation, and sort of you can learn from what already exists. And then I used that to inform cycle 2, which was the first cycle that took place at John Moores, and I'll mention a bit more about that in the future. And then I used that to inform what I did the next year. And so that's been kind of the plan of the PhD. So just very briefly to mention, in cycle 1, I with that reconnaissance one that is looking at sort of how are things and how are people experiencing that. First of all, sort of sought to gain the perspectives from a series of different autistic graduates, and they very much told me, described the mystery of the workplace. Some of the things were about the challenges of being different, how employment was often sort of leading to sort of a detrimental sort of mental health conditions, because it was so challenging. But they also were saying about actually career support in the university that would have been really helpful. Having the named person that you can go back to time and time again is important, and someone that just to talk to about things would be helpful. So that was really important. I also spoke to a range of people like me at other universities who were delivering specific support for autistic students and graduates. So they were maybe mentoring projects or supported work experience or webinars specifically for autistic students about employment or preparing for the workplace. One of the things that was really interesting that came from this was it resonates with Damien Milton's double empathy problem. And there was this real sense that a number of the careers practitioners I spoke to were just like, I know I don't fully understand, or I know I'm not able to communicate in a way that makes sense, or I'm not understanding the responses I'm getting, and that it was really strong, and really is important that something is done about that. Is so one of my key findings in terms of needing to raise understanding and awareness, and what, sort of for those careers practitioners who are really seeking to do something and to work with autistic students. Also, they talked about the importance of a person-centered approach to just it's important with all students, but particularly when it comes to some of the autistic students they were coming across, that it really does depend what else is going on for that student, if there's those mental health challenges, or just many deadlines, or sensory overload, and just an understanding that that more needs to, sort of there needs to be to meet people where they are at, and to use that student-centered approach. The cycles that came next that were at Liverpool John Moores, well, first of all, as mentioned, this was a participatory project, and I for this worked with autistic student consultants, and Jack was one of these, and it was so enjoyable to work with people to gain those firsthand sort of like, not just, I would like to think it wasn't just in a tokenistic way, but to work with students on and to co-analyze a survey of all the autistic students that we did, and then to plan a careers program, and to kind of listen to what the consultants were telling me. We did this. There were some elements of success, but the number of people that engaged with that was only about 10% of all the people that we knew of that were autistic at John Moores. So the next year, we decided to go with a multi-pronged approach. And this had sort of elements of those workshops again, but also I trained up my colleagues who deliver one-to-one careers meetings, careers appointments to have that autism awareness. We also developed the website with all sorts of videos. Jack features a number of times on those again, and this was something that we were able to get paid for, which was really important when it came to thinking about that. If I'm paid for my time, then it's really important that those autistic students were as well. So and very much not coming with a set list of things for those consultants to do, but telling, sort of advising them, we want you to tell us what we should be doing and what material we should be creating, and what the training should involve, and giving them the autonomy to do that. What we found is that there's been a sort of an ongoing sort of ripple effect, as we've called it, for some of the consultants. Jack will talk more about this, but I observed just the sense of community, or as one or two of the consultants said, never actually spoke to someone who's autistic here at university before, and I really like it. It's been really helpful. One or two actually even said, well, this is something I want to do more of. I'm really excited about being able to sort of speak up and bring about change. For me, it's been huge. I think I've gone from someone who knew it was right to do participatory work to actually thinking this is the right way to do things, all the time. All services in university should be shaped by putting the students first and listening, collaborating. And it's really just helped me have a confidence in what I'm doing, that it actually might be the right thing, as opposed to trying to guess and assume. We've noticed that I've involved the student consultants in some of the institutionally wide groups. That I run a disability employability group at the institution, and once Jack and one of the other consultants came along, it transformed that group. Having the student voice there, I think it actually educated those staff involved, and it led to a real energy, and actually led to all sorts of activities, a podcast. So it made a big difference. And I think this really resonates with the aims of participatory research, which are listed here, about sort of developing that understanding, change, but also empowering all of those involved. Just finally to say from me, it's been so exciting to take it beyond. So together, Jack and I have ended up doing all sorts of speaking. I think both sort of locally within the university, we've been invited to talks within the curriculum, and again, we're able to talk about sort of the disability models, so moving away from that medical model and the deficit approach to actually thinking about a strength-based and affirmation approach, And I think what I've sought to do is just even educate staff in terms of actually, I'm not the expert here, especially if we're talking about neurodiversity. Jack is the expert. So let's put him in the center of this. And I think I'm slowly feel like I'm perhaps making a difference there in that way, in how I hopefully demonstrating how I'm treating, seeing who is the expert in the room, and that being sort of really important. We have internal sort of staff student conferences we've spoken at, but then nationally we've done speaking sort of both at sort of cross university collaborative sort of sort of events that I'm involved in, that Jack has come along and sort of had, yes, I've been able to share his experiences, his advice there, Advance HE, and other sort of, yeah, it's sort of collaborative events like the Engage conference and also Image conference as well, which has just been really exciting. And Jack is always the one that people want to hear from more, which is just great as well. And without further ado, actually, I'm going to pass over to Jack so you can hear from him.
Oh, thanks, Karen. And what an impact that study has had so far on the organisation of LJMU, internally and also your own research. So I just thought it would be best to give a little bit of snippets of my journey, really, from diagnosis right the way through to my PhD now. So just a quick overview is I attended Kingsmead from the age of 3 to 16. I got diagnosis of autism and dyspraxia at the age of 4. And my dyspraxia was on such a severity, which I'll go into in a little bit, was so severe that I was on reins till the age of 5. I could not properly coordinate my body and walk properly. I kept on falling off chairs and things like that, just because my core was so weak. So following the diagnosis, there was then allocated an action plan and then an action plan plus for one term, both each of those a term, for another until the statement of disability was completed. I was then allocated Mrs. B, Lorraine Bradbury, who was an amazing learning support assistant at the age of 5, and she remained with me until I took my GCSEs at the age of 16. I was fortunate as well as my paediatrician stayed throughout my journey to the age of 18, where then we transferred over. There wasn't many services, but there was enough there. I was one of the first people on the Wirral to gain an educational healthcare plan under the Children and Families Act 2014. This is a multi-agency approach taking the child as an individual, involving health, education, the social care, the local authority, the children, the young person, and their family, all creating a bespoke plan, which is fantastic for me. Kingsmead was great in many ways, but there were challenges, such as teachers not understanding me, and also due to my dyspraxia, saying, "We're all waiting for you to get changed, Jack, hurry up," during PE, and the coordination difficulties that arrived there. But fast forwarding to my transition to Birkenhead Sixth Form College in Clawton, I was supported well, but I was referred due to anxieties during my GCSEs to CAMS, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, which I did not find useful, as it was very medical model thinking, and they wanted to prescribe medication for my anxiety, which I did not find useful. What I found useful was practical support from the college, showing me my classrooms and other facilities, assigning subject-specific learning support assistants who are aware of my learning, and I thrived in this environment despite being really anxious at the start. Became the learning assistance-based representative for the disabled community in the college, and enjoyed extracurricular activities such as debate competitions and going to conferences. For me, this is a good example of how good targeted support from people who have assessed, know your needs well, enables the individual to thrive. However, I know that many people slip through the cracks and don't get that wraparound support. So coming forward to my undergraduate degree, LJMU allow me to realise my full potential, and they've enabled me to achieve way beyond my expectations. I achieved a first-class BA Honours degree in Education Studies and Inclusion here at John Moores, and they're supporting me during my PhD. At the age of 7, my parents were told they may be able to teach me to read and write, but that I might not be able to take any formal exams. People stereotypically think that autistic people are clever. My profile is spiky. I was an excellent communicator from an early age, and I've achieved this by having the right service at the right time. It would have been easy for me to have fallen through the cracks and not reached my full potential. Disabled Students Allowance has also been amazing in supporting me throughout the undergraduate degree programme and my PhD. DSA have provided me with mental health mentors, academic mentors, assistive technology, and taxis to and from the university. This has been a massive help and reduced my anxieties in higher education exponentially. Thanks, Karen. Next slide, please. So when I was younger, I had a spiky profile. So the spiky profile was that severe that the educational psychologist who looked at it said that she'd not seen a profile this severe before. So in terms of my verbal ability, I was speaking from 18 months old, and it was 95th centile out of 100. For pictorial reasonable ability, I was average, say 55th centile. And for my spatial awareness, it was about -2 or -3. So it was all they could class it was the first centile. So this shows what a spiky profile looks like, particularly from the Statement of Educational Disabilities that came about in 2004 for me when I was formally diagnosed. And this shows how severe my coordination was to my verbal ability. So next slide, please, Karen. So coming on to my PhD. As I said, my PhD is titled Modern Policing in the 21st Century, Time for Inclusive Cultural Shift. I've been extremely fortunate with the PhD, as I've won one of 20 VC bicentennial PhD scholarships at LJMU. I started in 2022, and these are fully funded by the university for this PhD study. Merseyside Police are my project partner, and the PhD focuses on organisational culture and change management models associated with support offered to neurodivergent officers and staff within the force, as well as identifying areas of adaptation, innovation, and positive change for the organisation by looking into best practices internationally. Throughout the VC scholarship, I was fortunate enough to have travelled abroad and visited Washington, D.C. in 2023. I presented my research to the FBI at their headquarters in Washington, D.C. I've also conducted observational visits to the US Department of Homeland Security, Drug Enforcement Agency, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and the Institute for American Policing Reform. In 2024, through LJMU, we also got the opportunity to visit and spend 10 days with the Calgary Police Service. This was a phenomenal trip and one that I'll never forget. Calgary Police Service organised visits to their professional standards, real-time operations centre, their equality, diversity and inclusion team, their HR, the 911 call centre, and I also had the opportunity of giving a guest lecture to the Taylor Institute at the University of Calgary. These visits have provided a truly international lens to the PhD, have enabled me to document best practices for neurodiversity in law enforcement worldwide. Next slide, please, Karen. I've also been very lucky to have collaborated with Counter-Terrorism Policing, the National Police Chiefs Council, Number 10 Downing Street, His Majesty's Government. I have a very good working relationship with the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, as well as the EU Parliament and FCDO. Next slide, please, Karen. So the research benefits are to demonstrate to employees that the police are taking a genuine interest in officers and staff views and ideas around neurodiversity, enable Merseyside Police to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the EDI culture, and provide an opportunity for positive and meaningful change that will benefit the organisation, its employees, and the wider community. Next slide, please. So what have we learned from working together, both me and Karen, as two PhD researchers, but also to have been a research assistant on Karen's project? So I've got to say my confidence has grown due to having a seat at the table and being listened to by the highest decision makers in the university. And through collaborating with Karen, she's got me into some incredible forums. I've understood the strengths, challenges, and different perspectives from other autistic students and graduates in the university community. I've had the opportunity to contribute to institutional groups such as the Disability Employability Group, and this has led to myself and others being on the LJMU 1823 podcast for Disability History Month last year. I've also had other networking opportunities where I've been sent to Advance HE each year. I've been sent to the ADHD Foundation neurodiversity conferences through Karen and the careers consulting team. And also I've got to know Pro-Vice Chancellor Phil Vickerman, Head of Student Experience for LJMU, who's also the third supervisor for my PhD project. So it's been a phenomenal journey to diagnosis to now undertaking my PhD. And I'll now hand back to Karen. So thank you so much for that opportunity.
So yes, as I mentioned, it's been exciting as we were just sort of spending time reflecting on what's happened in the last few years. But it has been for me as well a real kind of learning and sort of developmental experience, I think I've gone from being someone who knew it was the right thing to do, as I said, and having what I thought was a bit of understanding of autism and how to support and work with and alongside autistic students, to actually that deeper understanding and appreciation, and particularly how I view them has really changed, going from someone to support to actually people who are the experts in their situation, and thinking about how we can work together instead. I mentioned that it's kind of led to a sort of deeper confidence in what I'm doing. But increasingly, I've started thinking, well, I need to tell others about this, and sort of seeking every opportunity to do that, because I think I'd like to think that sort of all careers practitioners, we come into this type of role because we want to help. But I think there's just a real gap in that understanding, and of what is needed there, that autism awareness, but also kind of that strength-based way of looking at things. Not just, I don't think people would say they go with the medical model, but I think maybe there's still that deficit thinking. And I think as I'm doing that, I'm sort of reflecting on how I've moved from kind of sympathizer to ally, autism ally, and I'm just eager to do what I can to kind of increase that thinking, and make sure that there is this emancipatory practice elsewhere as well. So as mentioned at the institution, I think what has been happening as we've been doing this, and Jack was one of the first um to be a co-creation intern, as I've called them. I've actually, because this has worked so well and it's been seen to work, I've been asked to sort of lead on this with other groups as well. So go beyond just autistic students to neurodivergent students, other students with other disabilities. And now we've been doing it with care experienced and estranged students. And for the first time this academic year, we're looking at how to support Black students who also experience disadvantages when it comes to the workplace. So this is again, that sort of ripple effect is starting to be seen beyond sort of just the initial aims of my research. And I think that as this has happened, I'm hearing mention of co-creation, and I know I'm not the owner of that term, but it's been talked about within my team and beyond, and within the university and beyond as well, which is exciting. And I'm now being invited to kind of deliver training in a range of other sort of institutions and beyond, to kind of talk about this. I've been developing recommendations on actually what needs to be involved. So just to finish off then, in terms of what we've learned, for others, Jack, I'll hand back to you.
Yes, so I've understand how to communicate your adjustments, so working hours and patterns. So both me and Karen have been kind of working outside of our normal hours, and day jobs really. Karen being the careers consultant and me doing my PhD research. So we've been catching up of an evening really, haven't we? So that's been kind of a reasonable adjustment, and we just kind of understand that really. From we kind of described this when we were talking, Karen, weren't we? What would be advice to myself starting university, or yourself, looking at going into the careers careers domain? So, be bold and seek out these opportunities. Speaking with Karen, and the collaboration with the university has been incredible. We've got inclusion as part of the core university values here at LJMU now. It's been really good to be part of that consultation, Karen, for both of us. Allies do exist in the university. We've got senior management, as we were saying, Phil Vickerman on side, and we've got cultural transformation has happened, and improvement for disabled and neurodivergent students, which I think has been absolutely key to improve service provision and provide all to reach their full potential, both in the workplace and in academia as well, throughout the disability courses.
I think for me, in terms of what I've learned, is I've had to think a lot about how I'm being aware from the start that there's this power imbalance. I'm someone who's employed by the university, and it's all very well to say to students, where there's no difference. You tell me what you want, but that's difficult for those students to really feel that they have they have that equal say. And so that I've sought to do that, and I've thought quite a lot about how important that is, coming with blank sheets, and really sort of trying to encourage those students to think like that. But obviously paying was an important part of that too, but it's something that I sort of still think about, really, is about how can I ensure that I'm doing this more. I think being open, I was really surprised at the sort of what we've called the ripple effect. But sort of thinking actually, if you start trying to do things differently because you think they are the right way to do it, perhaps we shouldn't be so surprised that it actually happens. But it's exciting, and I think that's something I would definitely recommend for people who are seeking to do things differently in a more collaborative and participatory way. I'm just more and more convinced of this strength-based approach. I know I'm speaking to the converted here in this audience, but actually that's not something that is a given, and it should be. The neurodiversity movement has come along, it's made a big difference, but there's still so much to do, both within university settings, even within student support settings in universities, but particularly in the workplace as well. And that's where I think my focus is shifting a bit next, because what I have seen is that universities are starting to change. But actually, the workplace, there's still a lot of need for improvement. And so I'm now looking at what can I do in an advocacy role out with employers in my current role. So we've developed training with and sort of information and guidance with the co-creation students, and we're then sending that out to all the employers that we, the careers service, work with, and saying, if you want to work with us, if you want us to advertise your opportunities, if you want to come to our jobs fairs, this is what we're expecting you to do in terms of to appreciate about our neurodivergent students. And so seeking to do what we can, but there's still so much to be done there as well. So very quickly, just to summarize our next steps, so basically to get the PhDs done. But Jack?
Yeah, so I've now collected all of my data with the police officers and the force. So I'm just currently in the write-up stage. I've been very lucky to have been published twice by the UK Home Affairs Select Committee and cited in those reports. So that's been incredible. So that's kind of where I'm up to at the moment. Karen?
Yeah, for me, it's just exciting seeing that model of co-creation has been adopted, and that there is this interest I just want to be able to make a difference. Also, in all of that, as I'm doing more training externally and seeking to manage a wider inclusion team locally, also just trying to find the time to write up the PhD. But yeah, we're quite excited about what might happen next together as well as separately. If Jack will have time in the future, because he's going to be so busy contributing nationally and beyond. But that's all we have to say just now. Thanks very much for listening. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you both for really interesting overview of the project, but also what comes from proper person-centered approach to learning and taking somebody's interests and unique skills and working with them. So there are a couple of questions. We've got time for a couple. One is about, I think, sort of generally. So I think this is Karen, and again, apologies if I miss people's names off, but with there being an increase in autistic adults attending uni, what changes would you like to see for graduates, and how can those changes come about?
Oh, that's a really big question, a really helpful question. I just think that it's really important that the university responds, and that they are starting to respond. They are seeking to do, in terms of that education experience, but also in terms of the support. So thinking specifically about graduates and employment, I think it's ensuring that careers and employability services like mine are sort of making sure that they have the adjustments in place that make those services accessible. So where we've tried that multi-prong approach, sort of trying to do things so that all levels make sure that everyone has that autism awareness, so they know that, sort of to check for sensory overload, they know to offer different formats of like kind of those interactions and more, and just that they might get it a bit more. I think there's just a sort of a lack of understanding. Though, as I said, the careers practitioners are, generally eager to help, but they don't necessarily know maybe as much as they need to going forwards. But also, as I said, a lot of it is out there with the employers, and some are starting to kind of, there's some really good practice in pockets. There's neurodiversity centers of excellence with some of the big financial firms. There's some real kind of real sort of like, yeah, as I say, pockets of good practice. But what concerns me is a lot of the small and medium-sized organizations, and that's where more of our graduates go, not the large organizations that everyone's heard of, like Apple and others that may be doing exciting things. It's those small organizations, and they need training and autism awareness from every stage in the language that is on those job descriptions, so it doesn't put people off because it says, ambiguous terms that stops autistic graduates from applying, right through to that recruitment process. Do they really need an interview? Is that the best way to assess someone's ability to do a job? And then once in the workplace, and I think finally what I would say is it's not just the managers that need that training, it's actually the colleagues. They make a big difference. If they were supporters and allies, it could make a massive difference to how many autistic graduates stay, are able to stay and to thrive in the workplace. Sorry, long answer.
Jack, is there anything you wanted to add just in terms of what you feel might kind of support autistic students, I guess becoming graduates, and because that's a challenge in and of itself, isn't it, for autistic and other neurodivergent students to complete the degree?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was
Jack.
listening to transcripts today, actually. And it's the point really they make in those transcripts. So you have like independent student learning plans at uni, and you have all of these supportive documents, that outline all your support needs and how do we support as an academic institution, or how do the government support you when you're younger in education? And then you go into the workplace. And then I know there's access to work there, but there doesn't seem to be this kind of holistic document like enabling the transition. The transition can be quite smooth or bumpy no matter where you are throughout the system. But then when you go into the workplace, employers don't seem to have those type of documents ready or even read them. So it's important that we get the transition right. And how do we do a warm handover rather than a cold handover of these students into the workplace domain, really? And this has been a question that's come up reoccurring throughout the interviews that I conducted with police officers and staff with neurodivergent conditions.
Yeah. And just to add to that, what Jack's saying is so important. The DWP has released something called it was called the Disability Passport. It's now called the Student Adjustment Planner, because it's through transition into university, but also out into employment. But at the moment, it's just a series of questions that are the sort of questions that careers practitioners might support students with, autistic students with anyway, asking what kind of adjustments do you need and what might they be. And so there needs to be more there. And some organizations like Diversity and Ability have actually put together apps, and we're sort of exploring those at the moment. It's just a hard time because there might be a charge for that to universities, and universities don't have that much money at the moment. It's quite a hard time, so it's just but seeking to do something about that, because I think that is, as Jack says, it's really important, that transition out to employment. It's really key.
That's great. Lots of comments again. We can make those available. There was one question that was about your research, Jack. I think it was from Juliet, who said, speaking as an American in the States, lots of autistic people who are involved with the police are also racialized as well. And is that something that you've been looking at in terms of your research, and kind of, again, what kind of impact does that have on experience?
I'm fully aware of the problems that have occurred, and there's a lot of intersectionality that happens with different, like whether that's race or LGBT is quite a prominent intersectionality. My supervisors have said you could go down massive rabbit holes with so many different intersectionalities here. The main focus that I've been focusing on has been primarily neurodiversity and kind of all its forms presenting. Just kind of keep it as generic as possible rather than going too specific, because I know that a lot of the research that I've been looking at outwardly facing, specifically around EDI, has been with a heavy emphasis on race. So I'm being very careful with that because I don't want to kind of continue that theme. I want to kind of challenge the kind of ideas that are out there really around that, and to kind of look at it from a generalized perspective. But I am very aware of intersectionality on that, and the challenges that that presents. But just as a quick one to finish off, the UK government, and it's worth having a look at. Was it Julie? I think you were saying before. It's worth having a look at the neurodiversity stop and search guidance that's been produced by the National Police Chiefs Council and the Metropolitan Police, because that outlines scenarios in varying different forms, and race is incorporated into one of those scenarios, which has been written by a leading barrister as well. So that is kind of that I've been promoting to police forces around the country, because that awareness is still not there around that yet. So it's a great working document that I've been kind of using in the training on that. So yeah, that's kind of that really. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for flagging that up. That might be part of your next research project,
Yeah,
to look at
postdoc
those
probably.
intersections. Not for now. Okay, so thank you both again.